topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good morning, America. Welcome back. Good to have you with us. Hey, we've got Steve Bonta, the publisher of the New American Magazine, joining us now. Hey, Mr. Steve, Happy New Year to you.
Hey, Bill. Happy New Year to you.
Well, not like things haven't been exciting. I mean, what a way to break in the new year with, peace breaking out, people, realizing that liberty could be attainable, but it's not free, right?
Yes, well, the latest reports are that the good people of Iran have paid a terrible, terrible price. Mm-hmm. They're estimating at least 12,000 people have been slaughtered by the government over the course of just 2 nights, January 8th and January 9th. That's the latest news. And obviously the figure is going to rise. So, I mean, that
initially they were saying around
for freedom is genuine, but they're finding out that obtaining freedom without having an armed populace is a very difficult proposition, particularly when you have a regime that's as ruthless as the Iranian regime is.
Well, it's shades and memories of the American Revolution, isn't it? I mean, although we had some muskets and pitchforks and things like that, certainly not to the level of the number one military force of Britain at the time. But finally the people just got back to backed up in a corner to say, you know what, if I have to die and that's the cost of freedom, I'm willing to do that, right?
Yeah, and the British were nowhere near as ruthless as the mullahs of Iran. My goodness, it's just they're just absolutely pitiless human beings. I don't think there's any exaggeration there. They're just opening fire and slaughtering people indiscriminately. And now apparently they're going, house to house and confiscating Starlink apparatuses and shooting people pretty much indiscriminately. Yeah, apparently in many places, but the Iranian situation, my sense is that this is going to end well eventually for the people of Iran, but they certainly have to pay a terrible price. And, yet another salutary reminder that freedom is not free. Mm-hmm. Iran, people don't realize it, but Iran, a lot of people don't know this. Yeah, you and I were alive. Remember when the Shah fell and was replaced with Ayatollah Khomeini back in 1979. But most people today have no idea that Iran was essentially a free, prosperous Western country, and was brought down by combined effort of the French and the American CIA and the Democratic President of the United States at the time, Jimmy Carter, and everything else, who believed all of the lying propaganda about how evil the Shah was and how terrible this regime was. And I dare say Iran and the world has had 47 years to sort of learn the lie of all that, but now people of Iran are paying the price for all that malfeasance almost a half century ago.
Doesn't it make you wonder what they were really thinking? What did they think was going to happen when the Shah was gone?
Well, it was like every other leftist fever dream. It was obviously the radical left, as then constituted in the 70s, that wanted a revolutionary regime. And basically what Khomeini and the so-called Islamic Republic of Iran are Iranian radical Marxists or Iranian communists. People forget that when the original Bolshevik revolution swept across the Russian Empire, one of the things that they did, and this is shown to great effect in the otherwise atrocious movie Reds with Warren Beatty back in the 1980s, was a pro-communist vehicle, but it does show very effectively one of the things that caused the American leftist reporter who was in in Moscow in Russia reporting, he wrote the 10 Days That Shook the World. One of the things that disillusioned him was going with the communists into the Muslim parts of the empire in Central Asia, and they start talking about, oh, this is the jihad. So they're nothing if not infinitely malleable, and so that's what they did, and so. That's how they kept the Muslims in line in the Central Asian republics and the Caucasus during the Soviet Union was they convinced a significant number of them that this is really a radicalized form of Islam. It's jihad. We call it communism. You call it something else. And so that same thing was introduced into Iran and elsewhere in the Middle East and Lebanon and so forth.
Right.
And
And then
now
you get
there's an attempt to sort of right the wrongs of the 20th century, but obviously that is not going to happen without a price.
Well, have the Muslims reconciled this, alleged theocracy, what has been presented to them, because it's been rather deceptive, all in the name of their God, and then what has it become? Anything but their God.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the reason that the radical left in the West is silent about what's going on in Iran. And we've heard all kinds of hooting and hollering about Gaza and all this type of thing. But most of them, if they talk at all they have to say is, well, this is really just Israel bringing this about. This is Israel, the machinations of the evil Netanyahu and everything else, because they do understand that radical Islam is a major part of the global radical left. It's basically part of the communist program. And so Iran, in that sense, is an asset of communist China and Russia both. And so, the overthrow, the legitimate overthrow of that regime would be a very significant event historically. But the original capture of Iran, which a lot of people don't realize, the Persian people are strong allies of Israel. They're not the same as the Arabs. They have this alliance that goes back to the time of Cyrus the Great, who founded the first Persian Empire, Achaemenid Empire. And one of the things that he did was, repatriate the Jews who had been taken captive into Babylon by the predecessor regime, by the Chaldean Babylonians. And so, so that goes back a long way. And of course, in the Middle East, historical memories are very long. So there's a lot of, one of the reasons that the Mossad has been able to operate so effectively in Iran over the decades, assassinating nuclear scientists and all this type of stuff, is because the Iranians, a large part of them, are secretly very sympathetic, very pro-Israel. And that's something that doesn't get out. Obviously, the radical regime is not. It regards, Israel as the little Satan and America as the great Satan. But that sentiment does not reflect the view of a majority of Iranians. I mean, I'm reliably informed that probably less than 30% of Iran is even practicing Muslim, and of those, only a smaller subset is going to be radical, part of this radical regime. Okay, so.
Well, like anything, history tells you that you can only oppress the people so long. Eventually, something's going to give, and that seems to be what's happening there in Iran right now, don't you think?
Yes. Well, the Persians are a highly cultured, intelligent people. Many of the world's best mathematicians are actually Iranians. I've met Iranian mathematicians. They're very, very, very good at mathematics. Many of the world's best wrestlers and weightlifters. I mean, they have this tremendous athletic tradition in their culture. It's a very great refined literary culture. The Persian language in various forms goes all the way back to the original Avestan language of the Zoroastrian canon, which is probably 4,000 years old or more. So it's and they're very proud of that, justifiably.
Right.
And they even claim that Cyrus the Great was the first person to create the idea of freedom of religion, because within the Persian Empire, as he constituted, now some of his successors were not as benign, but Cyrus himself was fairly benign as emperors go. And within his empire, he pretty much was, he allowed religious pluralism, and that was sort of an innovation at the time, the middle of the 6th century BC, when that took place. So the Iranians have this idea, and a lot of them I've been following very closely, 2CTV and other sources, people who actually are Persian expatriates who speak the language, and they say this, that they're nothing like the Arabs, and a lot of them resent the fact that Islam was ever foisted upon them, and a lot of them want to return to Zoroastrianism or Christianity or something like that, or no religion at all. So, yeah, it's very interesting. And if Iran, if there is regime change in Iran, if things go the way they appear to be going, we're looking at a historic change in the way historic world reset. You're going to see, with the end of Iran, you're going to, I mean, that means no more Hezbollah or Hamas funding or Houthis or these groups in Africa that are massacring Christians and everything else. And radicalized Islam generally worldwide. It won't go away altogether, but its main wellspring is Iran. They're the ones that finance and train all these people. And if that goes away, that coupled with the immediate and strong alliance that will arise between Israel and Iran is going to completely change the Middle East. And I would think greatly lessen the chance of some sort of a World War III breaking out in the Middle East.
Yeah, I think so too.
Could
And
be
also,
a very positive event.
I think so. And I think it's going to have a grave effect on Muslim migration. It may nip that a little bit too. Well, anyway, we got to go to break. We've got more from Steve Bonta on the other side. Stay with us. Hey, we're back with you, America. Bill Martinez here with Dr. Steve Bonta, the publisher of the New American magazine. Steve, with all that's happening here on the world stage, yes, I mean, we can, our eyes can turn. I mean, it's almost like my neck is getting disjointed here because one minute you're looking at Minneapolis and then you look overseas and you see what's happening in Iran. And overall, I mean, it's like God's up to something, I think, rather incredible here. Trump has defined it as a potential golden age for America. We might be entering a golden age for the world.
It could be. I mean, it's certainly, projecting the lines a little bit, as Robert Welch used to say. It seems clear that Cuba is going to be next in our hemisphere. And that's another thing. I mean, actually, I don't even remember when Cuba was a free country, because when I was born in 1964, it was already a communist dictatorship for 5 years. And the only thing that's changed in my lifetime is now you can at least travel to Cuba, and we have kind of limited diplomatic relations with the island. But it's still not easy for American citizens to go there. And it's a real shame. I've always wanted to go to Cuba. It's supposed to be a very beautiful place. And so that is, that seems, and obviously in Venezuela, things are still very much in flux, because it's one thing to black bag the leader of a country and his wife. It's another thing, particularly if you leave his vice president in charge. I mean, the first thing that happened was the regime went out and started arresting foreign journalists in the wake of the U.S. raid and cracking down on protesters and all this type of thing. So Venezuela's not there yet. Got rid of one bad guy, but the overall, the Marxist regime and apparatus are still largely in place. How that goes away remains to be seen. I don't want to see America become an occupying power in these countries. And I don't think the Venezuelans and the Iranians want that either. It's pretty clear that, they want to do it themselves with a little bit of help from us. Now, another issue that has to be addressed, is obviously, the constitutionality of all of this. And this is I think there's little doubt, particularly as regards Iran, overseas powers, that actions like bombing Iranian nuclear sites and whatever is going to happen in the next few days, probably something similar, are of very dubious constitutionality, although people on our side do disagree as to the extent of presidential war powers and whether, the constitutional power to declare war, which is given to Congress, completely precludes the president from doing anything other than, say, acting with dispatch in the event of an imminent invasion of the homeland or something, or whether he does have a little more discretion to do these sorts of limited raid type things. But regardless of that, in some sense, I am saddened by the fact that it looks like the Trump regime is trying to right many of the wrongs of the 20th century, of the last 80 or 100 years, that have reconfigured the world in a way that's favorable to radical leftism and communism, and to the disadvantage of the United States. But unfortunately, they're kind of doing it in ways that probably would not have met with the approval of the founding fathers. Acting, for example, without the advice and consent of Congress and things like this. But given the degree to which Congress has been compromised, I think Trump said quite rightly, if he'd actually shared with Congress what he was planning to do in Venezuela, for example, they would have the Democrats
it'd have been leaked
it.
Of course.
We would have lost the element of surprise. So ditto with Iran. So I don't know. I mean, we're kind of in a situation, because we've gone so far down that path of compromise with evil and allowed things to happen. It would be nice if we could go back in time and say, we're going to make sure the Batista regime in Cuba doesn't fall. That doesn't happen. Cuba doesn't go communist. We never have a Bay of Pigs or a Cuban Missile Crisis. We don't have Venezuela. We don't have a Foro de Sao Paulo and the Brazilian Marxists. None of that comes about. The Western Hemisphere.
And you may not have had an assassination of a president. Oh, by the way, let's throw that into the mix.
Right, absolutely. All this, but of course you can't do that. You can't turn back the clock. All you can do is say, well, given where we are now, what's the best way to get back to a Western Hemisphere which is robustly free and all that sort of thing. And so, so that's what they're trying to do, given the political realities of the world that we have now and our inability to turn back the clock.
Are you frustrated like I am? I mean, Congress is whining, but it's like, look, you guys have had decades to do something about it. Now it's taken the catalyst of one Donald Trump to say, hey, I'm not going to, you guys aren't doing your job. You kind of checked out anyway. And, if you're interested, why don't you get on board here and participate in the solution instead of constantly putting a stick in my spokes here. Now, I understand the Democrats and the resistance. That's natural. But the fact that you have even people in the Republican Party, you had 77 million people, Steve, vote to say, look, we want this cleaned up. We know it's bad. We're not sure how bad it is. Elon Musk comes in and addresses fraud and corruption. And now the people are going, oh, my God, we tarred and feathered the guy, but he was really more right than wrong.
Well, and that was only fraud and corruption that he was able to uncover with a very brief stint and limited assets at his disposal in Washington, D.C. Now we're seeing Minnesota, for example. Yeah,
right.
The coverings being torn off there and many other states as well, that it's just incredible. I mean, the degree of waste and fraud.
It's systemic, Steve.
Well,
isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is if you could roll back the clock in this case a lot further back to the late 19th century, Trump correctly observes at that time the federal government was much smaller and limited, and it was funded by tariffs. And those tariffs were levied routinely by Congress, by legislation. Okay, but what happened was the lies of the lefts and the Keynesians in particular convinced the world that the Great Depression came about because of something called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, which was a big tariff act at the end of the 1920s. That's an absolute damnable lie. It's not true. The Great Depression was caused by messing with the money supply, as these things always were. But tariffs got the blame and the black eye, and the result was, okay, we're just not going to rely on tariffs anymore. Well, now we've got the income tax, corporate gains taxes, corporate taxes, all this incredible panoply of highly intrusive taxes instead of the old tariff system. So Trump comes along and says, well, we need to get back to tariffs. He's right. Of course, Congress will never do that. So what does he do? He goes and he unconstitutionally starts levying tariffs. I mean, I'm very much concerned that the Supreme Court is going to make the very obvious observation that these tariffs are all unconstitutional, because under Article 1, of the Constitution, it's Congress and not the executive branch that's given the power to tax, and tariffs are a tax. The president doesn't have any taxing authority. Okay. So hope if we get past, the Supreme Court finds some way to because obviously if they do that, if they say, they're unconstitutional, you have to return hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars rather, it's going to be.
Maybe we can hope, Steve, that John Roberts would do what he did with Obama, with Obamacare, and step on the other side of the bench and give some legal, pretzel logic to justify Trump's moves on tariffs.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is if the Trump tariffs are allowed to stand, then hopefully in time, after a couple of congressional cycles, the Congress critters will start saying, oh, wow, we can make a lot of money doing this. We'll take this from here. And they start raising. It won't be as quick and instant, the way President Trump announced yesterday that he's going to impose a 40% tariff on any country that supports Iran. They won't work that way. They won't become an instrument of foreign policy, the way Trump has been brandishing them. But that's not really important. What is important is that in the long run, we return to a tariff-based system of levies, because they're the least intrusive form of taxes. And moreover, if the government eventually is brought back to more or less constitutional contours, it will be sufficient. Tariffs will be sufficient to fund the government. Okay, but right now we have this massive behemoth, out of control federal beast is being funded by a combination of illegitimate, very communist, social, progressive income tax, lest we forget. That's
Yes, right.
the 10 planks of Marx's manifesto on the one hand, and on the other hand, just plain old printing money, which we can do now because we've repudiated the constitutional requirement that money be gold and silver. We've gotten rid of that too. It's all paper money and computer money. So we do these two things, and the result is, wow, now we have an out of control government where ultimately you can print the money or raise these gargantuan levies to fund it, and everybody's happy in Washington, and the American people get ground down.
Well, as soon as Congress can figure out how to get their VIG out of the tariff, Steve, then then they'll get excited and support the cause here. They're not getting any money, and I'm sure Trump raised their ire when he said, this money's coming, the billions of dollars, and I'm going to control that. I mean, for those of us who follow the Constitution, that was like chalk hitting the chalkboard in the wrong direction, and it straightened up our spine a bit. But I can understand his frustration because Congress has mismanaged this whole situation, got us $38 trillion in debt. They walk away millionaires after, 12 years of service, supposedly. And, and it's the taxpayer that's getting the short end of the stick here.
Yeah, well, I mean, broadly speaking, we have the ideal of returning to constitutional government, which needs to be kept always in view.
Exactly.
Right? But on the other hand, we have the reality that the system has become so corrupted, particularly the legislature and the judiciary, and of course, the fact that we've allowed our leadership in Washington to add an entire illegitimate fourth branch of government,
the administrative
the regulatory state, all of this, which militates against federalism and constitutionalism. That's the reality. We see again and again, for example, how corrupt the judiciary is, where the guilty go unpunished and their cases get dismissed on technicalities, or they refuse to, that like the people that they've tried to go after for the lawfare against Trump. Every one of them, Letitia James and all of them, none of them are going to see the inside of a jail cell.
Right.
None of them are going to pay a fine. It's not going to happen. Okay. So we've come very far to the point where appeal to the rules and to the system, and assuming that the system will work right most of the time and justice will be served, we're very close to a precipice where that's no longer the case. And in some cases, I mean, what happened in Chile back in the early 1970s under Salvador Allende, the communist, was the legislature, the judiciary was completely corrupted. The government was taken over, and the only alternative at that point was basically a coup, was the use of force, which is what the military did. And but Pinochet, of course, is reviled for it, not because he went out there and killed a bunch of leftists, but because he did it extra constitutionally. Well, by that time, the Chilean Constitution had been rendered a dead letter. And the same thing happened in Peru in the 1980s and 1990s. And Alberto Fujimori saved that country. But again, he had to basically jail a bunch of judges and shut down the legislature. But both Peru and Chile are free and non-communist today because they went through these messy periods. I hope we don't have to do that. What Trump is doing is frankly messy and constitutionally problematic enough. But in the end of the day, the Constitution is not meant to be a suicide pact. And we get to the point where it's being treated like a dead letter. Sometimes extraordinary measures are necessary.
Well, stay tuned for details. Living in America, not necessarily for the faint of heart, Steve Bonta.
No, absolutely not. And making these judgment calls is difficult. So, for example, with Venezuela, there are all kinds of things that weigh in there. There's the Monroe Doctrine, but there's also the constitutionality, various other things. And to be perfectly honest, we here at headquarters have been guarded as far as expressing an opinion. We're kind of waiting to see what happens because there's no question that Venezuela, probably it'll end up being a good thing for the Venezuelan people, but whether or not it'll end up serving the interests of the globalists and whether Trump is really a wolf in sheep's clothing, as some people are claiming, I think remains to be seen. So, a lot of prudence and judgment, and maybe, wait and see and look at the factors. It's some of these issues have become very complicated because several generations ago, we, the American people, dropped the ball and allowed the enemies of freedom to introduce all of these complications
Exactly. Well, and to get out of it, I mean, short of, declaring, Chapter 11 or something where you got an outside interest to be able to come in and rectify the situation, how can you expect the people that has screwed up the program to fix it when
Yeah,
that's all they know?
yeah, they won't. And and so, for all the talk, I'm hearing a lot of good rhetoric coming out of the White House. I'm hearing rhetoric about ending the income tax. I'm hearing rhetoric even about getting rid of the Federal Reserve. That's being
Right.
talked about.
Mm.
But actions do speak louder than words. And so, I realize we didn't get into this mess overnight. And so we can't expect someone like Trump to come along on a white charger and get rid of it all in 6 months, especially if the elections don't go his way later this year. It's a process. But at least, by imposing tariffs, by saying this is a major revenue source, we're sick and tired of playing the globalist game and saying we're not going to do tariffs anymore because we're going to kowtow to the WTO and the UN. Rather than that, so I'm hoping maybe I'm too optimistic. I don't know. Maybe I'm naive, but I'm hoping that these will plant seeds and people say, aha, yes, we should go back to a tariff system. Oh, hey, look, it's right here in the Constitution. Let's do it this way. And let's start electing more leaders to Congress who are going to do that kind of thing rather than toady to the UN and the globalists and the radical left.
Well, it's been said that the people get the government they deserve, they voted for. And we need a smarter electorate, don't we?
We do. Well, we do that. We have this interesting situation now, Bill, I think, where there are more well-educated people about these matters, the Constitution, so than would have been the case 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 1970s, let's say, it was Republicans versus Democrats, liberals versus conservatives. You didn't hear a peep about, for example, the globalist system. You didn't hear anyone questioning the Federal Reserve or the United Nations or looking at the constitutionality of the income tax. Maybe one or two, malcontents out there, a Garrett or somebody like that. But these people weren't household names. They weren't well known. And today, there's lots of people. I think thanks to the internet, there's a large number of people who are becoming educated. The problem is there's also an increasing number of people who are literally illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing that from my colleague Duke Pesta, who is a college professor, PhD, very very well-read fellow. He runs the FPA, the Freedom Project Institute, our sister organization, online school, and he tells me his college students, most of them literally can't read anymore. And what's more, they won't. So that's on the one. It's kind of like we're separating into two moieties. One, a group of people who really do kind of get it, and they don't all agree. Obviously, people in our camp, we disagree. We have vigorous debate over this kind of thing. If there were a more strict libertarian or a strict constitutionalist in the room with me, they would have taken exception to some of the things I've said, and that's fine. But at least we all read and we think and we know
exactly
where Iran is in a map and Venezuela, and we have some feeling for the history and this kind of thing. And then there's this other large group of people, primarily the rising generation, who do nothing but text and watch TikTok videos, apparently, and live these weird cyberitic existences that just kind of militate against any kind of inquiry and introspection and anything of this sort. And they literally, have never read a book. Many of them have never held a book in their hands, have never read a book. So this is
the baby boomers were accused in the early years that their worldview was determined by 19-inch diagonal screens, and this new generation has reduced that screen size significantly. But the power of information that comes and the amount of time that they spend with those devices, it's pretty scary.
Well, in one sense, the internet is vastly preferable to television. And it's shown that, because it has, television is more of when you watch television, it's a passive activity. You sit there and you get talked to. And so it's an ideal vehicle, like the telescreen in 1984, for propagandizing. The
Exactly.
internet has this this interactive element where people are expected to weigh in with comments. The problem with that is that it creates the illusion, because you can go on the internet and be engaged. You can spam, you can troll, you can engage in ordinary discourse. You can go back and forth. It creates the illusion that, well, because it's now participatory, that therefore my point of view is legitimate, as legitimate as anyone else's, and so I don't need to do things like go out and read books. Heaven forfend, or become general. I just can have an opinion and put it out there in the internet, and other people reply, and that makes me feel great. It makes me feel empowered, but it's a very brittle type of empowerment.
Well, the information age in which we are in, and of course it was prognosticated. I'm grateful for Elon Musk for saving free speech when he bought up Twitter. I mean, do you realize, Steve, if he hadn't done that, where America would be today?
Yeah, no, that was a very important step, and it's not to say that we're out of the woods yet. There's a faction of people out there, the so-called transhumanists and people like this, who have these sort of weird cyber revolutionary point of view where they think that the future is going to be sort of a technocracy. And they see themselves as the eventual overlords of that technocratic apparatus. So, and Elon Musk is partly sympathetic to them, but everybody is. We're all a complexus of, good and bad, right and wrong. We all have blind spots, and Elon Musk is no exception. So, I mean, I agree with you. And yeah, I mean, obviously, to circle back to the Iranian situation for a moment, were it not for Elon Musk, we would have essentially zero information about what's going on inside Iran, because of he positioned Starlink satellites.
Yes, right.
When the regime shut down the internet and cell phones and everything else, sealed the country off from the outside world, he put the satellites up there. Now they're trying to jam the satellite signals with military grade jammers, but information is still getting out. So yeah, I mean, I think on balance, my take on Elon Musk is he's a tremendous asset to the United States of America. We're grateful to have him. I think he's going to be remembered as one of the great colossi of our age, in much the same way that we remember, the Thomas Edisons and the Henry Fords of past eras. He's going to go down in history as that sort of a, this really larger than life figure. And with all the warts, I mean, he's certainly not perfect, and his actions on behalf of free speech, at least, are just have been a remarkable, a wonderful contribution. So much so that we, for example, now make abundant use of X.
Yes. Where
prior to Elon Musk's takeover, X was off limits to people like us. We would get banned in a heartbeat. So yeah.
Well, Steve Bonta, as we wrap things up, how can people be in touch?
Well, they can always access The New American, the publication of which I'm publisher, online at thenewamerican.com. We are the red-pilled publication of record, kind of like the New York Times claims to be the newspaper of record. We are the red pill publication of record, and I mean that very literally. We publish a print or a digital version of the magazine. You can subscribe to either one. 12 times a year. We've gone from biweekly to monthly, and we also have a large and constantly changing website with keeping abreast of all these events with our perspective on it. And I can tell you, right now there's a lot of vigorous discussion, emails flying back and forth among our various people like Bill Jasper and others I think have been on your show before.
Yes, right.
About what to make of the Venezuelan situation in particular, but the Iran situation, obviously talk about that. We don't just react viscerally and put stuff out there for the sake of doing it. So that's we're trying to do. And our mission is really, I would say, threefold. Number one is to save the Constitution. Number two is to save our civilization writ large. And number three is to defeat the evildoers, the communists and the radical left and fellow travelers who are trying, very literally and now very nakedly and openly trying to destroy our country. Those three things.
You're exactly right. I agree with you. Steve Bonta, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. Take care. Have a great day. Happy New Year, my friend.
Thanks. Happy New Year to you. Nice talking to you. Bye now.
Good job, Steve.